Well, it's such a joy to be with you again. I don't know if you remember, I think the last time I was here was 11 years ago. And Father has graciously invited me back to join you for another parish mission that begins today at 5:30. Okay, maybe not. Actually, tomorrow night would be great. Tomorrow night, Monday and Tuesday night, we begin. And the theme of this year's mission is living in authentic faith. And it's really actually, I think, in many ways, so important for us to go back and look at this particular theme. Partly because of what we've just come through, right? We're just kind of climbing out of COVID and all the events of that time and the circumstances that happened. And, if we really believe that Jesus is God and he has, the three great attributes of which two of them are all-powerful and he knows everything, then the truth is that truly nothing happens to us in this life that God is not aware of and ultimately in control over. Nothing. So if that's true, then we have to ask, well then Lord, why did you allow COVID to come? I mean, people are obviously dying. Why did you allow it to happen? And I think one of the major reasons as we look back, and like any tragedy, any circumstances, like the Twin Towers and all those circumstances, when you look back after it's happened, you see so many blessings that the Lord has unpacked and unfolded as a result of those traumas, which really, again, speaks to the truth of God, that there is no evil in the world that Satan could ever do that God's not big enough to overcome. Praise be to God. But here we are, climbing out of COVID, and I don't know about you, but when you looked at the way the world reacted to COVID, it was really surprising. But what was even more surprising was the church reacted in very many of the same ways. Fearful, almost like a spirit of fear had gripped the church as well as the country. People were afraid of dying. And maybe for the first time in our lives, this was the first time we've actually looked at our own mortality and said, wow, I could die. And so people became very fearful of that. And in the midst of that came the uncertainty. Well, we're shutting things down for 2 weeks. It was prolonged. And now all of a sudden we're experiencing all these crazy, uncomfortable circumstances and situations. And everyone was in some sense freaking out. And I frankly was like, well, I couldn't understand. It's almost as if Jesus was not here. It's almost as if we began to doubt that God really had power, or that God was really in control, and it seemed like people were treating Jesus as if he was powerless to COVID. This virus came and now God was gone. And so people were really in many ways beginning to look towards science and the doctors, and it seems like we were placing our trust more in the science and in the doctors than in God. And yet, you couldn't help but ask, well, where is God? I mean, people are dying. So that leads us to maybe doubt. But people are always dying, right? I mean, if we're not dying of COVID, we're dying of cancer or car accidents or other circumstances. So whether or not we die is not really the question, right? I mean, we're all going to die at some point. But the question really becomes do we believe that what he did was really real? Do you believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross? Yes or no? Okay, I know it's a homily. You're used to just staring. But you're creeping me out. You need to respond. Do you believe that he died on the cross? Do you believe that he rose from the dead? Yes. Then what does that mean for us today? You see, there's a huge difference between knowledge of something. We can come and we can sit in the pew and we can see the crucifix and see the story of Jesus, and we hear the story of the church every week. And we know the stories of the church. We know the Word of God. We've been hearing it all of our lives if we've been coming to Mass all of our lives. But if we really believe that Jesus rose from the dead, then what does that mean for you and me today or century? See, there's a difference between knowledge of the truth of historical facts from the past and faith in it. Faith has to have substance to it. Faith has to have something that enables us to transform our lives and say that because that is true, I choose to live a certain way in the world today. Like, I think this is like the most optimal time for the church to shine. Because we're the ones who could show people we're not afraid because Jesus has us. He's always had us, has he not? Then why do we live like he doesn't? For many of us, it's been a challenge for us. We say we believe in God when we come to Mass on Sunday, but then we go out and for the rest of the week, we live as if our lives depend on what we do instead of what God does. And so we have this reading where Jesus is taking us kind of through beatitude type, examinations. He brings us through and he tells us, all the great blessed are those statements, right? Then he gets to that last blessed are those. Blessed are you when people hate you and when they exclude you and insult you and denounce your name as evil on account of the Son of Man. When's the last time that happened to us? When's the last time we were hated and rejected because we believe in Jesus Christ and because we were willing to profess his name out in public? Last week I was at a parish mission, and after one of the nights, the next day, I said, well, could someone give testimony in front of the whole group about what God is doing in your hearts? Because I said, how was last night? And they all said, great. Really? Was it good? Yes. Was anybody willing to give testimony about what God did in your heart so that everyone else in the congregation could hear what God is doing? Guess what happened? What happened? Nobody. Why? How is it that everybody knows that answer? Maybe it's because if we were in that situation, we'd probably go, I'm not going to say a word. Why? Of all places, you think that one place we could talk about God and we would be safe doing so would be here, in these walls, in these pews, yes or no? But we won't do it. Why? I think we've lost something, and COVID has showed us something very profound about what we've lost. As a church, we've lost fear of the Lord. Fear of the Lord. Not like we're afraid of God, but the kind of fear of the Lord that says, I yield my will to God's will because I trust in God. And we've replaced it with something else. You know what we've replaced it with? Fear of man. We're more afraid of what man thinks of us than we are afraid of what God thinks of us. We're more afraid of being rejected by men in our current life on earth for 100 years than being rejected by God for the rest of eternity. Wouldn't you say that's true? I mean, it's something we're all wrestling with, particularly in this culture now, because it's getting darker. It's getting more difficult. This culture does not want God. They don't want Jesus Christ. They don't want our commandments. They don't want our kids praying in public schools. They don't want anything of God in the public square. And they're systematically working to take that away so that it's not out before our eyes. They do not want us. In this time of tolerance for every group, they're tolerant for everything else, including a satanic club, but not Christianity. And here we are, the church. Well, if we can't even speak here, how could we ever obey Jesus' command to go out and speak? That, by the way, that's a command, right? That's a command, which means if we don't, it's a sin of omission, because we're called to go make disciples. But if we're too afraid to do that because we're afraid of the judgment and all the rest, like Jesus promised us, it would happen if we actually do it. But it's not happening. It's one of the interesting things. I mean, obviously, one of the other things that we learned from COVID is that when the church responded the way it did, and the bishops closed the churches down, and you couldn't come to Mass, and then gave you the dispensation. It gave so many people the opportunity to just leave, right? And lots of people have left the church. And in many ways, I'm looking at that and I'm going to saying to Pastor, I haven't said this to Father yet, but as I've spoken to other pastors, I said, I don't believe we should be paying attention to the people who have left the church. We need to focus on the people who are here. Because the reason they left the church is because they don't feel like what we're offering is relevant to them. There might be people sitting in the pews right now going, why am I here, Mom, Dad? This doesn't mean anything to me. And so we have to focus on what we have and what we need to do, because if they were to come back, they'd come back to the same church that they found is irrelevant and may not stay much longer anyway. This is just giving them the excuse to finally go. So that brings us to the question is, what do we really have to offer? What does Jesus really have to offer you and me? Besides sitting on a Sunday morning, punching our clock, what does he have to offer? What does the church have to offer? I believe the church has a tremendous amount to offer. He's moved in profound ways in my heart. He's healed me of profound wounds and profound addictions in my life. He's done an amazing work in my heart and my life. But if I don't tell you about it, you'll never know that God moves in those ways here and now in the 21st century, because that is true. So we get the reading from the prophet this morning, and he talks about it. I don't know if you read it because, it's so easy at Mass. We get into these ruts and we go through the motions and we kind of sit on automatic pilot. Do we even remember who the prophet was? Because that's just the way we are sometimes. At least it is me. I hope I'm not the only guy that gets stuck in this rut sometimes. But listen to what Jeremiah says. Thus says the Lord, cursed is the one who trusts in human beings, who seeks his strength in flesh, whose heart turns away from the Lord. He is like a barren bush in the desert that enjoys no change of season, but stands in a lava waste, a salt and empty earth. Then the prophet turns the corner, because here's our hope right here. This is where he gives us a signal of how do we do all of this, right? Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. He is like a tree planted beside the waters that stretches out its roots to the stream. It fears not the heat when it comes. Its leaves stay green. In the year of drought, it shows no distress, but still bears fruit. You see, what we need to be doing as Catholics is we need to be rooting ourselves close to the streams of living water where the Spirit flows. We need to be close to God so that when the heat of the world comes, and it is coming, it's already here. Slowly but surely, the government and pressures in our culture are pushing against the church and forcing us to begin to start letting go of what we hold on to be true. Forcing itself, right? We're being forced to pay for abortions. We're being forced to pay for birth control, right? They're taking away the moral ground. This is now moving against us, and unless we prepare ourselves, when that heat comes, we're going to run away. We're going to run because of fear. Look at how well we're already being manipulated. They tell us we're not allowed to talk about politics or religion. By the way, who is they? So we don't talk about religion. We don't talk about our faith. We don't share our faith with others because we're afraid. So you see, fear dominates us. Then where is faith? The real stuff. Not just saying I know the stories. But because the stories are true, I choose to stand in a public square. I choose to stand at work and say, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. I'm his disciple. But do we do that in school? Work? Social circle? See what I mean? But we're the ones that are here. So let me ask you one question. If those of us who are here, who say we really believe in God, are afraid to speak about God, who's going to do it? It's a good question. It's a fair question, because it really all boils down to the promise that the prophet gave us. He said, those whose trees are planted near the streams, the roots go all the way in and tap into the living waters of the stream. And even in droughts, a year of drought, they're bearing fruit, which means that God is here, and He will always provide for everything we need in good seasons and bad seasons, if we are close to Him, if we choose to believe. So for our mission, we're going to talk about what does authentic faith really look like, of which I've been alluding to this whole time. What's the real faith that is made of substance, so that when the culture comes against the church and begins to force you to say your Catholicism is worthless, we don't want you practicing your faith. Or when your bosses come to you and go, just like COVID, if you're not vaccinated, you're going to get fired. If you are a Christian, you're going to get fired. I can't afford to get fired. I've got a family. I've got a mortgage payment. Right? We've got responsibilities. Well, do you think God knows that? And will take care of us? Yeah, but I really like to see the provision. Yeah, but He's not really good at wanting us to see the provision. Why? Because then we don't grow in faith. Faith is taking Him at His word. Faith is applying His word to our lives even when we can't see the provision, especially when we got those beautiful little ones that we need to take care of. See, this is what COVID is revealing about us. Our need to grow deeper in faith, closer to God, trusting in Him, trusting our lives to Him. He's got us. But Deacon, somebody could die. We're all going to die. The chances of you dying with COVID is much, much, much less than you dying in a car accident on the way home from Mass today, but you weren't worried about getting in your cars. This is what we're up against. Do we really believe that God still loves us, cares for us, and wants our very best? And what does that look like for us today in the 21st century? So I hope you'll join us. It's going to be 3 nights, not starting today, but starting tomorrow. But bring your Bibles. We're going to grow deep. We're going to go deep and look and examine this part of our lives and really begin to examine for ourselves, because this is what we're going to need in the days to come, this faith. This trusting that God really does have us. And He really desires to care for us. And it doesn't matter what age we're at, because we're all going to get hit. We're all going to get hit with this. And we need to prepare our little ones and our big ones for this.